Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for questions from the floor. So we've got a couple of mic runners. If you want a succinct, informative answer, you'll ask a succinct, informative question. If you want a long-winded, waffly answer, you'll ask the same. So, in the interest of time, also please direct your questions at one of our panelists, or if it's for everybody, please state so.
Thank you. Is it on now?
It's on.
It's on. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentations. This question is for everybody. The reality now is that we have a city with a lot of cars, and some people taking buses, some people cycling, some people walking. I do all four of those. However, I am put off cycling in particular because there is no cycleway close to where I live. We live in Epsom. How do we encourage people to use active transport when we still have to mix it with the crazy car drivers of Auckland? Why don't we make our bus lanes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? And why don't we also provide cycle lanes on those roads, like, for instance, Manukau Road or Gillies Avenue, which are wide enough and could have a cycle lane and make it 24 hours?
Okay, so on behalf of Auckland Transport, I can answer some of that, although some others might want to have a say. So we are actually about to start a project called the Integrated Corridors Program, which is a bus lane cycleway safety program, which is looking at 11 corridors across the region, but actually on the isthmus. I don't know whether Manukau Road might be one of those. I think it is. People nodding. Good. So that is all about the fact that we have typically gone and applied one modal solution. We've come and put in a bus lane, and later on we've gone somewhere else and put in a cycle lane, and we've done a safety project over there. And more we're recognising that that was a foolish thing to do. We should put them together. So we've combined the bus lane program, the cycle program, and the safety program, and we're doing an integrated corridor work. That will be hard because, as has been said a lot of times, they're not making any more space on those corridors. And we're going to have to make compromises about who wins where, and to make safe cycling infrastructure in particular is going to be really hard, because that's a new thing that we're putting in that's going to make the most change. I mean, bus lanes have been around for a while, and you can usually just do a bit of paint. A dedicated, safe, physically separated cycleway is tough, and sometimes we're going to have to cut down trees to make a bit more space, and that's going to be hard for the communities. We're going to have to take out things that they appreciate, like pedestrian refuges or parking or features that we really like, or things that make things work well. So that's going to be a challenge for us, but we are fronting it more than I think we have in the past. In terms of the 24-hour bus lane issue, sometimes we do have them where we can get away with it, but very often we've put in the peak time only, because that's when the most buses are there, and outside of those times the bus lanes look empty, and we get a lot of pushback from the local community to say, I'd like to be able to park in my shops or whatever outside of hours. I think increasingly, as the frequency goes up and up and up, and the multiple layers of the bus network come together, it will be self-evident that they need to be longer hours, whether they're 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever, that will change. But I think that will be the reality of a new city, where we're having more people around, more people moving, and the need to accommodate them all in the same space.
If I could just add, paradoxical fact everyone needs to remember is that when a bus lane looks empty, that means it's working. If the bus lane is jammed, that means it's not working. So of course the bus lane looks empty, that means it's working. We get this especially from the perspective of a motorist who's stopped in traffic and sees that empty lane there, and now and then a bus goes by so fast they don't even see it, and so the lane looks empty to them. No, that means it's working.
I'd say that there are a multitude of reasons. We could probably have an entire conversation just about the reasons why we can't have all those outcomes. Some of them, though, are simply money. from my role in a local board, we get a small amount of money that we can apply to small funds, small projects, and the cost of actually sometimes putting something in so far exceeds that there's just nothing you can deliver, and it's a real shame. So one is that, and I'd say another one is, and I kind of want to pose this to the panellists as well who work in these professional realms, is are we innovatively looking at the way we're using the space? Because there's a lot of traditional ways that we're used to. Could we allocate the road corridor differently than what we're used to doing it? So that's more of a question.
Could I just perhaps respond to the lady that made the question? I think the question is fantastic, and I think Daniel's given a good answer. There is a lot of change happening in Auckland at the moment, and if you think back to the 1950s, Auckland had the highest patronage of public transport per capita in the whole world. So we were the leading city in the world for PT patronage. Today, we're one of the worst. We've taken 50, 60 years of motorway road building. That's been our agenda. We ripped up the tramways in the 50s. We built a very different type of city. There's a lot of space, and Jessica's right. It's about reallocating that space. It's about understanding who your city is for. You also talked about money, Jessica, and at the end of the day, a lot of big projects don't have any budget for walking or cycling. And I think that's another way to get this program up and running, because it's always like the icing on the cake, or it's the nice to have. It's got to be about the must have. It's got to be in the money at the front as part of the project budget, rather than something we have to run around with a begging bowl. So it's about changing that. And I would say that the new government has been amazing. $28 billion is coming into Auckland over the next 10 years. We've got a long way to go. I mean, it's not going to even touch the sides, but it has to start. And we're on a journey, and the bus network, as Jarrett said, is an amazing global success story, the way that has transformed our city and will continue to do so. So we're putting all these things back in. We haven't even started with light rail. I mean, we might be the last place on earth if we're not careful. So these are things we've done badly in the past, but we have a plan, and we're about to start rolling it out. And this is the right conversation, but it's going to take ages. Many of us won't be around by the time it's finished, but that's just life. It's all about the children anyway, so as we started today with. So good question.
What is the plan for improving, this is probably a question for Daniel, the interchanges? So if interchanges are key to the transport network, if I'm traveling with my two kids who are 5 and 7 and easily bored, how do I improve the experience for them at the bus stops with regards to pollution and wayfinding and just trying to negotiate to other stops, and also on the buses knowing when I have to interchange if it's a route I haven't done before?
Yep, good question. Very happily, my team at AT has just started a project called Neighbourhood Interchanges, which is developing the business case to get funding for improving neighbourhood interchanges where two bus routes overlap. Coincidentally, I was also in the customer central part of AT today for them to try to figure out how better to, not indoctrinate, that's not the right word, integrate customer understanding within all of our AT business processes. And they specifically mentioned wayfinding, universal access, and kind of diverse trip purposes, because so much of our planning is set up for commuting trips, and that's how we've designed things to be used and where things are positioned. As a parent who takes my two kids on the bus after school to a squash lesson and has to bring all of their equipment and school bags and grumpy kids with me, and in the rain with no bus shelter, I appreciate that as a challenge. I think it was, I can't remember who mentioned about Ludo saying he wasn't a woman or wasn't disabled or something. I think it's been people like me who's been designing the system, and that's not right. It should be people like Jessica, people like you, who should be designing and planning the system so that works for you. So I think AT will be, in going forward, doing a lot more of that customer understanding. What is the voice of the customer? What does it need? And how does our current design not meet those needs? I think we've got a long way to go. And as Jessica also said, there's not a lot of money to retrofit some of these things. And that's probably going to be, I think the intent is there, the will is there. The hard thing will be actually getting on and delivering it.
On the theme of design, how do you balance the need to move more and more people to more and more places with the need to create places and spaces people want to be?
I'll take that. If you're experiencing that as a conflict, you're doing it wrong. Because when you do it right, it's not a conflict. You have to work, we all need to experience place, and we all need to experience movement. That means place needs to accommodate movement, and movement needs to accommodate place. If you're experiencing a conflict about them, you may be experiencing a conflict that is really about an inefficient use of space, and that we're not allocating space correctly. It is also true, though, that your notions of an ideal place need to take into account and adjust for the realities that movement is also a human need. So, yes, you're going to need buses to go down certain streets so that human beings can have the freedom of access to their city. That may not be your perfect aesthetic vision, but you have to turn that into a virtue and embrace that, because movement is part of life just as much as place is.
Where are our runners? One here, then
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's working. Okay. Hi, kia ora. This question's for Jarrett, but I'd also like Jessica and Daniel to be able to respond as well. So Women in Urbanism conducted a survey at the beginning of this year that showed that over 85% of women in Auckland have been harassed while using our public transport and walking and cycling network at some point. How can we be designing transport that gives women freedom from harassment? Because I just don't see that we can have freedom in transport planning without freedom from harassment, and we need women to be safe when taking those trips. So I'd really like you to answer that one.
Not being a woman, I think the easiest answer is to have more women at the table doing the design. But there's a general question about crime and safety on transport that's implied there, for which the answer is, paradoxically, the more people use public transport, the safer it is. And so we have to manage that. We have to honor the feelings of people who choose not to use public transport out of those fears. We have to honor the courage of people who choose to use public transport anyway, despite those fears, because only because people are there will more people be there, and will we ultimately have witnesses when stuff goes wrong. So it's not easy. I mean, there's a whole bunch of infrastructure things about that, lighting, good interchanges and so on, that are part of that. But I think also just having your perspective at the table is very important.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I just mentioned, earlier on. That's part of that freedom from when creating freedom. So it's two things. It's freedom to get places, but it's freedom from some behaviours. And some of that, I think, our society and our culture needs to respond to that. It's not just the mode. The mode is one thing. You need to have empowered people who are able to make active changes. I know personal experience. If I'm on a train and somebody's behaving poorly on the train, my train warden isn't necessarily empowered to do anything about that. And so that's a real challenge, and I think so sometimes empowering safety personnel is useful, and then the basic septet ideas around lighting, around people being there. So it's sort of, there's a few ways to approach it, and some of it is not just the transit, but some of it is empowering security.
Yeah, I don't think we should need to have to change the system. I think the problem there is with the men, not with the system, to be honest. It's the culture. So I think more lighting, CCTV, better guards in the trains is the wrong approach myself. I think the problem is with the men behaving badly, and I apologise on behalf of men. It wasn't me. I'm always surprised. We had a conversation at the beginning, actually, before this started, about the behaviour of men and how they treat women, and I'm constantly shocked, and I'm appalled about a different way of behaving just because the person you're dealing with is female. and it seems wrong from my perspective to be saying we need to design the system differently, make the building bigger and wider and more well lit, and more escape routes or whatever. I think that's failing to address the real issue, which is a societal issue that falls on men to the way they behave and treat people around them. And I think I would love to be in a position where we don't have to talk about changing the system for that purpose.
Unfortunately, I've been given the signal and I'm also being stood over for the lectern. So, panellists and Jarrett, thank you very, very much for your time this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've not been able to ask a question this evening, our panellists will be staying behind and you'll be able to come up and ask them questions.